Hello. Over the last few hundred years, the work of no playwright has been performed as widely and consistently as that of Shakespeare, and today he commands more stages than ever. This evening, the BBC resumed its massive project to televise all of Shakespeare's plays. Earlier this year, Thames Television broadcast the Royal Shakespeare Company's production of Macbeth. At the moment, in London alone, there are 5 Shakespeare plays to choose from. In Moscow, he's performed as much as their national playwrights, and in New York, an enormous new theatre complex in Brooklyn is opening, which will base its repertoire on Shakespeare's plays. And up and down the country, in schools and halls and reps, Shakespeare's put on week in, week out. But there's very little agreement among critics and audience and directors and even actors as to how Shakespeare's English should be tackled. What actually constitutes good verse speaking? This prompted us to ask the Royal Shakespeare Company to develop, specifically for television, what is in fact a masterclass on Shakespeare's verse. We've been working with them on this project over the last 6 months, and this will take up 2 editions in these studios for the South Bank show. Neither we ourselves nor the Royal Shakespeare Company would claim that there's just one way of performing Shakespeare. We invited them because they have a longer tradition than anyone else of performing the plays, and we thought the way they approached the problem would lend itself to the production we had in mind. The programme involves 3 of the directors of the Royal Shakespeare Company and 6 of the leading actors. The masterclass is introduced by the joint artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company, Trevor Nunn.
Can we just ask, where do the bulk of today's audience come from? I mean, do we have any drama students?
The RSC takes workshops up and down the country, but this is the first time they've done one specifically on verse and especially for television. Trevor Nunn's most recent Shakespeare productions seen on television are The Comedy of Errors and Macbeth.
We've been seeing an unprecedented amount of Shakespeare on television recently and listening to a good deal of discussion about the background to the plays and their themes. So we thought we'd talk tonight about Shakespeare's verse and about the particular problems of verse speaking. So, here to help in the work are Ian McKellen, Michael Pennington, John Barton, Jane Lapotaire, Patrick Stewart, David Suchet, Alan Howard, and Terry Hands. I think it's important to get clear right from the word go that our subject tonight is verse speaking, and that verse speaking is no more than a department of acting and not an alternative to it.
We haven't seen a Shakespeare for ages in which it's possible to realize that he wrote in iambic pentameters. And I should like to feel that this production is the end of a long corridor, and that somebody started putting on again a very simple Shakespeare. Shakespeare as the Elizabethans might have seen it.
Since the Royal Shakespeare Company, by tradition, puts sense and sensitive characterization first, who can wonder if the speaking of the verse lacks a certain elocutionary zeal?
It is indicative of the way modern RSC productions make us listen.
What was once, only a few years ago, a new way of speaking Shakespeare, a manner of great intellectual and emotional power and scrupulously attentive to the text, is now no longer even functional.
What an extraordinary company this is. All through this season, I've been saying how much better their speaking of verse is than it has been lately. And now, here is a production in which hardly any of the cast seem to have any idea at all what their words mean.
Why do the actors recite and declaim their lines in such an old-fashioned way, as if the play was not produced in 1973, but in 1793?
Well, it's clear from those snatches of criticism that people disagree pretty violently about how Shakespeare's language should be presented. And I suppose the point is, people always have, and it's certainly not our intention tonight to lay down any laws. Styles of verse speaking have, of course, changed perceptibly since the war, and hugely since the turn of the century. Olivier's call to arms, in his own film of Henry V, made in 1944, is justly famous.
On, you noblest English, whose blood is fit from fathers of war-proof. Fathers that, like so many Alexanders, have in these parts from morn till even fought, and sheathed their swords for lack of argument. Dishonor not your mothers. Now attest that those whom you called fathers did beget you. Be copy now to men of grosser blood, and teach them how to war. And you, good yeomen, whose limbs were made in England, show us here the mettle of your pasture. Let us swear that you are worth your breeding, which I doubt not, for there is none of you so mean and base that hath not noble lustre in your eyes. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, training upon the starts. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit, and upon this charge, cry God for Harry! England and St. George!
Well, I remember thrilling to that when I was at school, and also thinking that it was tremendously natural. But only 35 years later, it sounds to my ear unexpectedly rhetorical. Well, at round about the same time, Edith Evans was playing Rosalind with Michael Redgrave as Orlando, and she sounds delightfully, though emphatically, musical.
Make the doors upon a woman's wit, and it will out at the casement. Shut that, and 'twill out at the keyhole. Stop that, 'twill fly with the smoke out at the chimney.
A man that had a wife with such a wit, he might say, wit with a wilt.
Nay, you might keep that check for it, till you met your wife's wit going to your neighbor's bed.
And what wit could wit have to excuse that?
Married to say she came to seek you there. We shall never take her without her answer, unless you take her without her tongue.
Well, Henry Ainley was certainly concerned with the plangent and melancholy sounds of Othello's lament over Desdemona's body when he recorded this scene from the play in 1938.
Cold, my girl, even like thy chastity. Oh, cursed slave! Whip me, ye devils, from the possession of this heavenly sight. Blow me about in winds, roast me in sulphur, wash me in steep down gulfs of liquid fire. Oh, Desdemona, Desdemona, dead. Oh, oh, oh.
Well, we may laugh. I rather suspect that would probably be very moving in the theatre, but certainly, I mean, this is just a completely different style from anything that we're used to. Well, to pursue the point back to 1906, Sir Herbert Beerbohm Tree organised the end of Mark Antony's speech, provoked by the sight of the murdered Caesar's body, by ascending in semitones up to the climax.
Blood and destruction shall be so in use, and dreadful objects so familiar, that mothers shall but smile when they behold their infants quartered with the hands of war, all pity choked with custom of fell deeds, and see the spirit ranging for revenge, with Ate by his side, come hot from hell, shall in these confines with a monarch's voice cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war, that this foul deed shall smell above the earth with carrion men groaning for burial.
Granted that earlier generations had quite different ideas of what was natural and what was real for all kinds of social reasons. Nevertheless, I think it's fair to say that to our contemporary ears, those actors were preoccupied with the music of Shakespeare's language.